Okay, I think I'm going to make a start. We might have a few people join us as we go, but that's fine. Okay, so hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar in partnership with 𝗩𝗚𝗘𝗢 on quiet quitting, what's all the hype about? So I am 𝗩𝗚𝗘𝗢𝗢. I am the Managing Director of HR Star with over 20 years experience in the HR industry. HR Star is a HR consultancy, and we provide HR support to businesses who outsource their HR function. And that is something that we do throughout the UK and beyond, and we work with varying companies in terms of size and sector. We take a really people-focused approach to HR, so we believe that by investing in your people that you create and maintain highly engaged teams, and highly engaged teams are more productive because they're more motivated, they feel that they have a sense of belonging, they feel well recognized for their efforts. And so when we have highly engaged teams, it really does drive business success. So we work, as I say, with business leaders, creating and maintaining highly engaged teams. So we look at all areas of the people experience at work, so the employee life cycle, from everything from action through to induction, onboarding, performance management, reward and recognition, development, to ensure that each areas are in the best possible shape that they can be to really look after our people. So that's me, and I'm really pleased to be here today. Like I say, 𝗩𝗚𝗘𝗢𝗢 HR solutions. So that really does help with the work that we do, and we have platforms that support the work that we're doing. So they're going to be looking at quiet quitting. I'm going to cover what is quiet quitting, how we spot a quiet quitter, and tips for HR teams and company managers. So looking at communication strategies, how to improve employee engagement and prevent other employees from turning into quiet quitters. Quiet firing, I'm going to touch on the new trend we are starting to see off the quiet quitting, and then there will be an opportunity at the end for anyone to ask any questions as well. Also, just want to say, if you do have any questions throughout the webinar, please do just drop them into the chat to the question and answers, and I will do my best to check in on those as we go along, but also give opportunity at the end to again touch in on those as well. So any questions, just please do drop them in the chat. So, quiet quitting, what is it? It's obviously something that we're seeing more and more of. I mean, I think we just need to, we would be blind or heard of this expression. It's featuring a lot on social media, especially TikTok, lots of videos on TikTok, but also we're seeing on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. So quiet quitting is not quitting, as in people are not leaving their jobs, but they are showing up and just doing your job. So we obviously are now in pre-pandemic living, and as the world of work has experienced that drastic change since the pandemic, the change in workplace culture has resulted in a mindset that is currently dominating social media, quiet quitting. So as I said, it's very much off the back of how work has changed and work experience has changed for people off the back of the pandemic. So it's when people are showing up to work with no above and beyond attitude, not taking on any extra responsibility, they have no ambition to climb the career ladder. And it's not a bad thing, it's just as long as those people are also not expecting a promotion. So we see quiet quitting in terms of, how do we spot it? So people showing up to work, so they're not actually leaving the workplace, but they may be arriving late or leaving a little early, or they are logging on exactly at their start time and logging off as the minute that time arrives that they're due to log off. So they're not going, they're not showing up and doing additional hours, they're not putting in any more than that bare minimum that's necessary. They're not attending meetings, or if they are in meetings, they're not fully engaged in them, they're not maybe contributing to meetings, they're not putting their hand up to take on additional projects, or to be sort of included in extra activities outside of their normal sort of scope of work. We may see a reduction in their productivity, so they may start doing less in terms of still doing what the job's required, but again, just doing that bare minimum, not sort of going above and beyond. Or we may see that their productivity has dropped. They might actually be producing less contribution to team projects. So 9 out of 10 within the workplace, we will have projects that happen, you know, maybe outside of our day-to-day remit, and these people are contributing less to that, and maybe contributing less actually to the team, full stop. So not getting involved in activities that the team are doing, whether that be in working time or maybe social activities. They're not necessarily participating in planning as well, so you know, other meetings, or being like sort of that lead in terms of, okay, let's drive this project on, let's look to how we can find a solution to this project or this problem. So a real lack of passion or enthusiasm, you know, are some of those signs that we will be seeing of people that we're deeming as quiet quitters. So why are we starting to quit quietly? You know, what's the sort of driving reasons behind that? And as I said, it's not necessarily a negative, but it can be a cause for concern. So some of the reasons that, you know, we're seeing quiet quitting happening is excess workloads. And I think this is a really key point here, because I think what we saw during the pandemic for many is a reduction in workload, maybe a slightly slower pace within the working environment, and obviously a whole change in terms of how people were working. So, you know, moving to remote working from home. As we come out of that pandemic, for many businesses, they've bounced back really well. So what we've now seen is an increase in workload. And if you couple that with the fact that people are also struggling to recruit and retain talent, then workloads have increased. We haven't got the people on board to help share that workload. So that is falling to the people within, you know, the existing people in the team. So excessive workload. And there isn't anything wrong with like having peaks in workload. 9 out of 10, that's an expectation within business. It's when those workloads, excessive workloads, are sustained for long periods of time and people start feeling burnt out. That's when we'll see that is causing a problem and causing people to quietly quit. Poor compensation. So, you know, when people are feeling that they're giving a lot and not receiving back, you know, the value that they're adding. So if people feel they're not fairly paid, or they're not receiving pay reviews, or their benefits package haven't been reviewed or updated, you know, we're also seeing in terms of with people struggling with the cost of living crisis, but also, you know, people want more from their roles. The pandemic really changed people's expectations and what people want from work. People were able to work from home more, commute less, have more of that work-life balance. So people want to be compensated now, you know, for the work that they're doing and the value that they're adding. Blurred boundaries are another sort of reason why people are quietly quitting. If there's no clear objectives, no clear expectation, and no clear role defined for them. One of the projects that we do a lot of with our clients at HR Star is really looking at role definition. So, you know, how are we clear what that person's role is, or are we just, you know, adding more and more responsibilities and tasks to their existing job role without looking at that, you know, impact on workload, without compensating them for that. So we need to be really sure of what those boundaries are in terms of people's remits and expectation. Lack of management support, this is key, and this is, you know, a driver for many problems that we see, like people related problems in organizations. That manager not supporting their teams, you know, not being there to check in with their people on workload, to, you know, to understand what they're working on, what that means in terms of, you know, the hours that they're needing to work, what support that they need in terms of training, development, etc. So lack of manager support, key to quiet quitting. Unclear or shifting expectations. So as we've already touched upon, you know, if we during the pandemic were expecting people to be more relaxed in terms of like when they're logging on or off, or be, you know, more relaxed in terms of they were working from home, there was no expectation for them to be in the office. If that has now changed, are we clear in terms of what that means for everybody within our business? Have we set any expectations around what hybrid looks like, for instance, if, you know, if that's a model that you've moved to within your business? And poor communication or conflict resolution skills, massive again. People want to be communicated to. They want to know what's happening within the business, what that means for them. But they also want to have a platform where they can feed back as well and feel heard. So communicating, two-way communication is absolutely key. And if we don't have that within the business, people feel that they're working in isolation, especially if they're working from home, or if, you know, there's conflict within the team and these things aren't being addressed and resolved, people will just in effect give up and just turn up and do the bare minimum, and they won't want to go above and beyond or do any more because they feel that that effort isn't seen and isn't rewarded. So, you know, it's all very well and good to have a bit of stress or high workloads within a business. Good busy is actually really productive, but constant stress from high workloads and poor management of that and lack of support will lead to burnout. And once we have people in the business who are burnt out, they're unable then to give, you know, probably anything more than the bare minimum, and you know, they will stop going above and beyond, and they won't be able to, and then that obviously feeds into the well-being of your people, you know, sick absence, etc. So we do really need to be looking after our people and looking, you know, for people who not necessarily quite quitting, but maybe are burnt out or disengaged. So when people do not trust their employer to moderate their workload or adequately reward them for their effort, then this phenomenon can erode the manager-employee relationship. And a good manager-employee relationship is absolutely key. Without that, it will cause a deepened dissatisfaction in the team, and it also will create conflict and will eventually lead to a toxic work environment for other employees. You know, we talk a lot about culture and the need to have a really strong culture, and how do we look to create that. It's in a manager's best interest to recognise and correct the problems as soon as possible. And when we think about culture and creating a good experience at work for our people, we need to look at, like I said earlier, every aspect of that employee life cycle, but also starting with the culture. And you know, your culture is very much derived from your values and your behaviours. So do we have company values? Are we threading them through all of our people processes? You know, are they more than just a lovely, pretty picture on the wall? Are we, you know, looking at our people when we're recruiting and ensuring that, you know, these people we're bringing into the business are adding and aligning to those values and therefore adding to our culture? Are we using our values when we manage performance? You know, are we taking those attitudes and behaviours that align to those values and really managing people's performance against them? And are we using them when we reward and recognise? Are we, you know, making sure that when people are adding, you know, to adding value and, you know, really enhancing our culture, that that's recognised and rewarded? Everything from a simple thank you to obviously reviewing salary and benefits. So HR leaders, people managers play a really key role in ensuring that, you know, that the workplace is a positive place for their people, and therefore that, you know, are less likely to have disengaged people within that workplace. So how do we go about making sure that we have a really strong people strategy and that we avoid disengaged people or lots of quiet quitters? Because whilst we need what I call steady eddies within the business, people who are the backbone, who turn up and do a good job, if there's too many of those, then your business will coast and it won't excel. And also, if there's too many of those for a long period of time, then it's only a matter of time before that starts to become disengaged, you know, a disengaged workforce, and or even, you know, worst case scenario, a toxic one. So I'm just going to run through some sort of top tips in terms of how we can ensure that we're doing the best by our people, which will then ultimately lead to business success. So communication strategy, anyone who knows me or works with me know that I talk a lot about communication. It is absolutely key in terms of making sure that people feel heard, listened to, but also that we are sharing information with our people about things that they need to know. So how the business is performing, any potential changes that we're looking at, who we're bringing into the business, people that are leaving us, how we're using our values, how are we addressing changes externally. So i.e. when the pandemic hit, you know, communicating what our plan was to cope with that. Now the cost of living crisis, what's our plan as a business to address that? So communication is everything. Having a good communication strategy in place is really key. So guidelines for what and how information will be shared and how people can give feedback. And I always think we need to consider various methods here and channels to ensure it is two-way. So, you know, what's really great if you can do is like like all hands meetings, so where business leaders share information to the whole company, and that can be done either, if possible, face to face or through digital channels, so online meetings or even emails out, etc. But then we also have to be clear like how we're going to share information as well, in terms of individually, like people's performance, development, progress, etc. So we need to ensure that we are using one-to-one meetings, performance reviews, either that be annually or 6 monthly. And again, like maybe some more informal communication channels. I think especially if we're working more remotely, are we going to have like drop-in, lunch sessions where people can jump online and like have lunch and chat, non-work stuff with their teams? What are we doing in terms of like social interactions, outside of the workplace? So just making sure we have channels. And also something that is really great is, again, like using your digital platforms, your HR software, to share information as well. So I know like on 𝗩𝗚𝗘𝗢, you can share lots of information. So that's really a great way as well to ensure that we are communicating and we have a strong strategy in place for our communications. And then again, how we gather feedback from our people. So again, there's different platforms that we can use to gather feedback through employee surveys, but also, don't forget that human touch and doing one-to-ones with your people as well. And then if they're feeding information back to you, making sure you're acting on that information and doing something with that feedback that you've gathered. Reward and recognition is key as well. People, ensuring that your people are recognised for the value that they add and rewarded fairly, making sure this is consistent and transparent. So that's everything from rewarding people through salary. So do you have clear salary, pay scales, etc. in place? And is it really clear how people progress through those, so people understand what they need to do to be able to progress to the next level? But also look at your benefits package as well, and just always remember with that, like with benefits especially, one size won't fit all either. So are you able to offer flexible benefits, so that for some which they can pick and choose their benefits within an allowance, so that they can choose the benefits that really do benefit them, because it is only a benefit if it benefits the individual. So are there discount platforms or incentives, etc., that you can use? And then recognition, like I said earlier, a simple thank you, or even like celebrating people's success is so important. It's a massive motivator and a massive part of employee engagement. So recognize the people, recognize when they are doing a really good job or they've achieved something, celebrate birthdays, milestones, anniversaries, etc. Really key to have that human approach to that. And then maintaining boundaries, look at your culture, ensure working late is not encouraged, and systems exist to support this. So do you have a policy of, no Sunday emails, no weekend work, and make sure you communicate that stuff as well. And also that your leaders lead on that. So people need time to switch off. People need time to spend with their families or out of work activities. So respect those boundaries and, make sure that the culture encourages that as well. Also, I think in terms of this stuff around communication or boundaries, expectations, like, look at other things that you can do as well. So, the number of meetings that you're holding or the length of those meetings, are they necessary? Do we have, should we have more shorter meetings to ensure that they're more productive, make sure meetings have agendas, etc. Look at the collaboration tools that you use. Has Slack gone crazy and everyone's expected to be on Slack answering messages all the time? Set goals based on achieving milestones and quality of work rather than just hours put in, etc. So yeah, really important, all of those things. Other sort of key things to look at as well, workloads. Touched on at the beginning, one of the key, or one of the drivers of quietly quitting, is that excessive workloads, and those excessive workloads being sustained. So how are we managing workloads? Try to maintain steady and predictable workloads. And if additional work is needed, which it will be at times, businesses peak and workload increases at set times of the year or for set projects, etc. But ensure that's short term, and then recognize and reward. I think people are very willing to do more and put in more if they know that it is for a short period of time, or that they know that the recognition and they're rewarded for that. So keep those increases in workload short term. Look at monitoring the morale of the people within the business. Check in with your people regularly, whether that be face to face or digitally, or ideally both. Encourage open and honest feedback. you know, we need people to be really telling us that, you know, what's going on with them, because we can only really address issues or potential problems if we're aware of them. And people will only share that stuff with us if they have trust, and we foster trust through having that open and honest feedback. So, but look for red flags as well. So if someone's, you know, dipping in productivity, or they're suddenly having more absence, or outspoken people are now being quiet, it's not necessarily a sign always that they're disengaged or quietly quitting. There could be more going on, but again, we won't know that if we're not asking them. So monitor that stuff, check in with your people. If your superstars start pulling back, take note of that stuff. There's probably a reason for it. It might not always be work related, but let's just check in and find out what, you know, how they're doing, you know, what's going on, etc. And monitor engagement. Are your people being disengaged, less motivated, less productive? And a great way of doing this is using like employment surveys to gather data, and you can track that stuff. So, you know, I'm not talking about sort of old-fashioned, you know, annual surveys where you wheel that survey out once a month and you just, you know, gather all the feedback and then you don't do anything with it, or you do little with it. Like in the moment feedback, there's loads of platforms out there, and we use them at HR Star. You know, just simple questions like, you know, how are you feeling down a scale of 1 to 10? You know, look at those numbers, gather that feedback, and just ensure that you're always monitoring that stuff. One thing about employee engagement, and that I will say, is like, it's never done. You don't just go, oh, my team are engaged, tick, move on. It's a continual process to maintain an engaged team, because, you know, people are humans and things happen in terms of inside and outside of work. So we need to be continually doing things to ensure that people are, you know, engaged and motivated. So I talk a lot about employee engagement. So why is employee engagement so important? An engaged employee is someone who feels valued. They go above and beyond. They are more innovative. They take less time off sick, have less performance issues, and are less likely to leave. An engaged workforce is key to business success. And this is what HR Star is built on. We truly believe, and we know through experience, that if you have a highly engaged workforce, that they will be more productive. Businesses who take a people-focused approach to running their businesses are more successful. You have to look at like the big players like Google and Apple, but even, you know, other smaller scale businesses have achieved success through ensuring that they really do take an interest and put time and resource into their people, and ensuring that they're really engaged. And you just have to look at some of those stats there to see why it's so important. 37% of employees consider recognition most important. So people want to be recognized. As I said, that can just be a simple thank you. But also, you know, bigger than that, recognize when they hit milestones like, you know, anniversaries, you know, length of service ones or birthdays, etc. Those teams who score in the top 20% in engagement experience a 59% less turnover. And right now, that's so key when we're looking at retention and recruitment being so challenging. We want to look after the people that we have and we want to keep them. You know, turnover costs the business massively in terms of, you know, less lost skill, time in recruiting, but also obviously the money involved in recruiting and replacing people. So, you know, we want to see, you know, that turnover figure as low as possible. And by really looking at engaging our people, they are less likely to leave. A stat from the US, only 34% of US workforce feel engaged. So that's really, really worrying that, you know, we're still seeing that engagement isn't taken seriously by many, and that we're still not working hard to engage our people. And Gallup Employment Engagement Statistics poll reveals that 53% of workers in the US are non-engaged. So, you know, we're seeing these stats, 34% of the US feel like engaged, 34% feel engaged, and 53% are not engaged, and 60% of all employees are disengaged. So there is a difference between being engaged and disengaged, as in there is a middle ground, and that's probably where we're seeing it's quite quitters. Only 1 in 5 employees is not confident that their manager will provide regular constructive feedback on their work. And again, we're seeing the importance of communication there, but also the manager's role in ensuring that their people are engaged. Highly engaged employees are 87% less likely to leave their place of work, and globally only 15% of employees are engaged in their work. There's still lots of work that needs to be done, you know, and that's why we see lots of, you know, challenges with recruitment and retention, but also why we're seeing like these hot topics like quietly quitting, because, you know, the impact that it has on business. So HR and people managers play a vital role in engaging your people, and will impact on not only whether your people are quiet quitting, Also your retention rates, absent numbers, and overall business performance. So these are just some stats that I've also pulled from Harvard. So the least effective managers have 3 to 4 times as many people who fall into the quiet quitting category compared to the most effective leaders. These managers had 14% of their direct reports quietly quitting, and only 20% were willing to give extra effort. So that just really highlights that the importance that managers are playing, in terms of engaging their people or not, and obviously on people quietly quitting. Managers who balanced results with relationships saw 62% of their direct reports willing to give extra effort, while only 3% were quietly quitting. So I think, we're seeing here, I don't think quietly quitting is a new thing at all. I think it's just been given a new name. I think within business, the stats are showing that, the lack of focus on, engaging workforces and people feeling engaged are really highlighting the impact that this is having on businesses, and, how management plays a key role in this. So quietly quitting is another buzzword, but it's not a new concept. And it's something we will continue to see more and more of if businesses do not invest time in their people. And I can't stress that enough. I think, we've all probably been in a situation where we've had that Sunday night dread. We don't want to go to work tomorrow because we don't feel recognised or valued at work. It's just a job. And one of, like I said, the reasons we set HR Start was to change that, to really try and change people's experience of work, because not only does it benefit the person, if they're able to go into work that they enjoy, where they feel valued and fulfilled, and they get an opportunity to develop, they feel they're well recognized and rewarded for what they do. As a business leader, and I've been a business leader myself, it just shows and just pays absolute dividends, because your people, will go above and beyond. They do everything that they're expected and more, and your business thrives because of it. At HR Star, we really practice what we preach. I spend a lot of time ensuring that my team are engaged, and I've seen 107% increase in turnover over the last 12 months, and profits soar by 80 plus £1,000, because I really do put so much time and effort into my people, and then they put so much time and effort into their roles, which obviously makes sure my business excels. So success in management requires learning as fast as the world is changing, and I think the last few years have really kind of shown us how quickly things can change. Obviously, nobody expected the pandemic, and we all had to adapt quickly to that. And we adapted, and we adapted well, but obviously it has had a long-lasting effect in terms of people's expectations have changed. So managers are key. Really key, and obviously working with your HR people to support and lead on engagement is also, I think, where managers can get that support. I just wanted to touch on before we look to finish is quiet firing. So off the back of quiet quitting, we're now starting to see a phenomenon around quiet firing. So where management creates non-ideal work conditions to make an underperforming employee quit. So something I see quite a lot of is managers promoted to a management position and then not given the tools and skills to manage their people. And management is a tricky job. It really is. And I think if it's not done properly and you don't have those, difficult conversations, you don't set expectations, you run the risk of obviously having underperforming people. But then what's really not good is if we don't address those things. So the next big thing, and I'm going to be running my next webinar next month on this, is quiet firing. So, what is that? How do we stop that? How do we ensure managers are managing their people so that people are not in that position where they're sat there in the workplace thinking I have no option but to leave? Because those people are going to be leaving with a really negative impression and of your business, and people will talk about that stuff. And that's another thing I think is really important to remember, that the world is so transparent now. There's so many platforms that people can use to share their experiences, and people do, Glassdoor reviews, and people will go and share, their bad experiences. And, I've seen candidates turn down roles because they've checked out Glassdoor reviews of the business that they are looking to join. And so it's really important that managers not only are working hard to engage their team, but they are addressing any, underperforming or any difficult conversations with their people, because I think quiet firing will have far bigger sort of consequences and more impact than having a team with quiet quitters in it. So that was just, as I said, a bit of a overview, and hopefully, that's helped in terms of explaining a little bit about what quiet quitting is, how we spot the signs of that. and how we address it. So thank you for listening. I'm going to hand over now. If anyone's got any questions, please do drop them in the Q&A or the chat function, and I will answer those for you. Okay, no questions at the moment. Okay, if anyone has any questions outside of this, then please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can find me on LinkedIn. Also, my website is hr-star.co.uk. So that just leaves me to say thank you to everyone for attending today. A recording of the webinar will be shared with you. I hope you all found it useful and you have some takeaways. And yeah, thanks again for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Just to add up, the recording probably would be available tomorrow morning. YouTube just takes some time to process the video, and yeah, just make sure to check it out if you missed some part. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you again, everyone. And yeah, look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Dates and details will be shared very soon.
Bye-bye.
Hang on, we do have a question. Sorry, we have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have any suggestions for increasing employee engagement when workload is the issue, but the workload is not something that can be controlled, such as in healthcare? Great question, and I do get this. I know a lot of what I've talked about today is putting an emphasis on managers to do more like managing their people and looking for ways that we can obviously increase engagement. So yes, so when you're in a high workload environment, so healthcare, I think a key part of that would be communication and gathering feedback. So look if you can use a platform where you could gather some in the moment feedback and where people don't have to spend a lot of time to find out really where those areas of maybe disengagement are. And then I would say, look to if you can tackle those through sort of communicating back to your people. So 9 out of 10 disengagement does come from people, lack of communication and not feeling heard. So if you can put a platform in place where people are able to share feedback and that you are seen as managers to be listening to that and actioning that feedback where you can, that will go a long way. And I think also in, something like healthcare where people are working extremely long hours, high workloads, then recognition is key in terms of like engaging people, like, making sure that you're seeing that, you're thanking them for that, you're where you can giving them, some time off, you're looking after their well-being, maybe look to implement something like an employee assistant program, which they're not actually expensive at all to implement, and that gives people a whole host of options in terms of discount on products, helplines, or advice that they can go to. So just I think be doing more than just the basic for those people, but yeah, communication would be really key. Okay, any more questions? Okay, I think that's all the questions. So yes, thank you again, everyone. And yeah, hopefully see you all again on the next webinar.